was very lucky as a child to be given a Super 8 camera from my grandfather, and I explored the Super 8 medium. We made little films amongst my friends, and then later on when I went to film school I started really getting into more sort of European art house kind of cinema and sort of exploring that with Super 8 as well. I met a guy called Mark Hartley who made Not Quite Hollywood and a few other quite famous Australian little documentaries and films, and we focused on music videos. The 80s was still, there was still money in music videos, and there were big videos being made by people like Richard Lowenstein. It was still the golden era of music videos, so that's really where I started, and I've probably directed about 150 music videos now. Around the early 90s I discovered the cinema of transgression with films like people like Nick Zed and Richard Kern, and I was really influenced by this style of filmmaking, and I made a film called Mercy, and I put that in a film festival at the Panorama Cinema, which was run by John Hewitt, who co-directed Bloodlust with Richard. The session that my film was in amongst people like David Trussell, Richard Grant, Remo Camerota, who I later joined a band with called Sight Carney, and from there it was almost like this little sort of group of people into this industrial sort of gothic subculture sort of banded together. When I made my film Narcosis in the late 90s, it was released in 2000. That won Best Film at the Melbourne Underground Film Festival, and from there I really started working with Richard after that.
Closing time.
So I was really obsessed with this whole sort of industrial sort of subculture and wanted to make a film which was very similar to, say, something like Tetsuo the Iron Man. I wanted to make a film like that, but I guess it took a few years to develop the script, and by the time I was ready to shoot, it was almost like this whole new underground movement had come through. The old school sort of punk scene was it was still existing, but there was this really thriving underground techno culture and these underground raves happening. So the whole film was sort of changed and was based around that scene, really. It was the first time when you had small sort of 3-chip cameras, and with these little cameras you could create quite a sort of cartoony, kind of very saturated sort of colourful look. So it was just perfect for that techno sort of rave glow kind of slash industrial sort of movement that was going on. So we sourced a lot of the cast and crew through, going to underground clubs, through tattoo parlours. It was just a very sort of niche little family that I sort of managed to get together. I got a lot of private investment. I've been very lucky that I've always had a job working in advertising and corporate video and all that sort of stuff, so I got a lot of help from people. I did have people like Shane Jacobson, who went on to do Kenny. He played a few cameo roles in the film and helped me out a lot with the lighting and those sort of things, but that was before he was really acting. He was working in sort of the lighting area. Also Adam Zwar, who went on to do Rats and Cats and Wilfred. He was also in the film, so I still had a few people that went on to bigger things. There was a lot of, I guess, people were involved in drugs, so it was a very kind of hairy kind of experience. The crew would just disappear. We'd be breaking into places without permits. All sorts of things would happen. The CBD wasn't as developed as it was these days. You could really go into an alleyway, take in a generator and lights, and just take over and really do what you want. It took about 3 years from go to O to do, so it would have been 18 months of solid shooting. So yeah, it did take quite a while. I think in the end it sort of cost us around 55 grand. We probably owed an extra 30 grand, so it was probably an 80 grand budget, but we actually physically spent about 55 grand. Graphics was a very niche sort of area. It wasn't like everyone it wasn't available to everyone on their laptops like it is today. So we had a few little animation companies that helped us out, and we had, spaceships flying under the Westgate Bridge and, through the Crown Casino and all this sort of stuff. And people were really blown away by that back then. I think, it was very... it wasn't seen much in independent film back then as much as now. The company back then was called Sector 3, and there was also another company that were based out in Footscray, where a lot of the raves were going on around that time, the Every Picture parties and the Mud parties in that sort of that complex out there. Bakaitis premiered at the Melbourne Underground Film Festival in 2000. It was the first MUF festival, and it won Best Film and Best Gratuitous Use of Violence. We were really lucky to have Michael Tierney from America come out to screen his film Evicted. Later, Michael went on to become Joe Blow, the porn star Joe Blow, and he took it back up with him overseas, and he took it to the Cannes film market, and he sold it to territories like Brazil, Thailand, the US. So that's why when Richard made the film, The Last Days of Joe Blow, I felt like I had to repay the favour to Michael. There was a DVD release through a company called Vanguard in the US. It's never been released in Australia. That was my only sort of narrative feature. I've made several documentary features since then. The last thing I did was a documentary on Mark Chopper Reid. It was called An Evening with Mark Chopper Reid, and it was his last performance at the Athenaeum Theatre. That was released, and that was really a special moment to work with the real Chopper just before his death. I also did a documentary, once again with the connection with Richard. I did a documentary on his 90s club called the Hellfire Club. So my current film that I'm working on at the moment is called Cult Girls, and it's inspired by European 70s art house horror cinema. There's a lot of occult and pagan themes going on. I started my initial shooting in Lithuania and Germany about 18 months ago, and it was great just shooting over there, the locations and access to cast and crew, just a very unique way of doing things. One of the main themes of the film, apart from occultism and paganism, is black metal. We're going to tap into the black metal scene a little bit and go into the ideology of the scene. And we've got Hussein Koda. He's been really great in helping me develop the script and make sure that I get everything right and that I represent the black metal community in the right sort of way. I wouldn't really call myself a DOP, but as an independent director or on projects where there's no money, I think being able to shoot is always handy to have, and it lets me work with other people too. Filmmaking, it's a very collaborative process, and even though I love directing my own stuff, I'm always helping other people through editing or shooting or associate producing sometimes. So that's been the great thing about Melbourne. I've been very lucky that I've been able to continue working in underground cinema and my whole life really, and music videos, and I've always been able to be behind the camera, and it's led me to see many things, so I'm very grateful.